What is going on, guys? It's Modded Warfare here. Welcome back to another PS4 video. So got something a bit different for you guys. As you can see, my PlayStation 4 home screen looks a little bit different than usual. And that is because I am on firmware version 1.76. I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the original jailbreak for the PS4, just for a bit of nostalgia, and to kind of compare it to what we have now so we can see how far we've come from the original jailbreak. But first, we actually have a sponsor for today's video, Ridge Wallet. Ridge Wallet is a uniquely designed compact wallet with RFID blocking inner plates that can hold up to 12 cards. Plus, they come with either a cash strap or a money clip that you can use for your banknotes. So far, I've only had mine for a few days, but I love how small and compact it is. Gets rid of that awful wallet bulge and trying to get your wallet in and out of tight pockets. So it's definitely a keeper for me. Plus, it comes with a lifetime warranty, and in the unlikely event that you don't like it, there are free returns. They have many different designs. The one I have here is the black aluminium design, and if the wallet's not to your taste, they have many other great products like rucksacks, phone cases, and more. And if you use the link ridge.com/modded and enter the code modded at the checkout, you can save yourself 10% off your purchase. So click the link in the pinned comments underneath this video. It helps support the channel and you get a great product in the process. So thanks to Ridge Wallet for sponsoring this video. This was the first jailbreak for the PS4. It was on such an old firmware, 1.76. This firmware version came out in August 2014. So incredibly old. The jailbreak didn't happen until a lot later on. I think 2016, maybe 17, that we got the jailbreak. So even then it was quite hard to get a hold of a console that was on an old firmware like 1.76. Probably impossible now. Maybe there's some people still selling them on eBay and stuff, but yeah, it's a pretty rare firmware to be on. So yeah, this is my original 1.76 PS4 console. I know a lot of people got into jailbreaking the PS4 when we were already on 5.05 firmware. So I thought it'd be interesting just to show you guys what it was like originally. Because, you know, people complain about being on 5.05 and being stuck on 5.05, but trust me, it's a lot better than where we started. So I'm not going to go over like showing you the old 4.05 or 4.55 exploits either, because they're very similar to 5.05. Not much really changed between those. But 1.76 was very different, being the original jailbreak. So if we go on to the internet browser here, you can't access it. That was the first thing, was that you could not get onto the internet browser initially on 1.76. So what you had to do was use the user guide in the settings. So if you went onto the user guide, this would work, but of course you don't have the option to actually go to a URL. So it just takes you to this manuals.playstation.net, and the first way of actually getting out to access an exploit page and being able to go to a specific website was having to kind of just use the links on this site to try and navigate outside of the user guide page and then get onto Sony's website. From there, you could go to their social media and get onto YouTube. And then from YouTube, you could find links to Google that would take you to Google. And then from Google, you could then do a Google search for an exploit page to start exploiting the site. You'd have to do that every single time you access the user guide. So yeah, it wasn't the best solution. They've actually patched it, because what you used to do is go to the support section down here, and that would take you to Sony's website. But what they've done is they've made it so that it doesn't work on the PS4. So they actually patched that. So what you have to do in order to use the user guide to get onto Google, you either had to use a proxy server on your computer and run the exploit page on your computer, and then use a proxy to redirect manuals.playstation.net to Google or to a WebKit exploit page, or you could connect your PS4 to your computer and use internet connection sharing to share your computer's connection with the PS4, which is what I'm doing here. And then from there, you could use the host file on your computer. So if I go to my computer here, you'd have to go out to local disk C, Windows, System 32, which is down here somewhere, and then you'd go to drivers, etc hosts, and you'd edit this in Notepad++. And then if I just save, I'll have to open it as administrator. And then what you would do is you would get Google's IP address. So if we just ping Google, google.com or .co.uk, because I'm in the UK, and then we get the IP address to Google. And then what you would do is just copy that IP address, paste it in right here. And then you do tab, and then you do manuals.playstation.net. And then what that does is it redirects manuals.playstation.net to Google's IP address. So then if I go back onto my PS4 and load the user guide again, what will happen is it should try and take me to Google instead, which it does. Obviously, there's an error because it's trying to take me to this document GB PS4, which doesn't exist on Google. But I can just click the Google option here, and then I can now Google search from the user guide. And from there, I can then search for an exploit page. And believe it or not, the old WebKit exploit I used to use is actually still up. The server's still up. So it was f-x.fr. So if I go to that website, that'll take me to the old WebKit playground. And there we go. This was the original exploit site that you used to go to. From there, you could run like the Linux loader. So you could actually load Linux on 1.76, but there were no drivers at that point. So it was very buggy. It was just, you know, you couldn't run games or anything on there or even stream much stuff. You could access YouTube and stuff, but it was very, very slow. It was like running Linux on the PS3. It's that kind of experience. You also had other cool features in here, though, like a file browser. So you could actually access your PS4 hard drive or part of your PS4 hard drive from here, from within the browser, but you couldn't actually, you know, edit any files on there. So there's an FTP server plus debug settings. That was actually added later on. Initially, you had to use a separate payload for debug settings and a separate payload for FTP. And then you have, you know, sockets. You could connect via sockets and a few other things. Eventually, a payload came out, a web browser patch that would unlock the web browser. And I guess one good thing about using the user guide is that you don't have to clear cookies and website data and stuff like that, because it doesn't really use any of that stuff for the user guide version of the WebKit. But yeah, so in order to get the web browser working, though, you would run the code execution, which is essentially the same as the bin loader. I mean, it's the same thing. Code execution is bin loader. It says waiting for payload. And then you run your usual payload injector, so netcat GUI, which is a payload injector I made way back in like 2017. And then you take your web browser patch and you'd inject it. The port was 9023 back then on the 1.76 exploit. Not 9020 like it is now. They changed it for some reason. And if we change the IP address to the correct IP and then inject the payload, as you can see, it says executing. Okay, so it's been about 30 seconds. I've just been, obviously I cut out the waiting and it's still going, still executing. The code execution normally didn't take this long on every payload. It was just the web browser patch took quite some time to actually get working here. There we go. So it said done there, and now it's gone back to not started, which means it's finished. And now I can run the internet browser without getting that error and use this from now on to access the exploit page. So yeah, that's what we used to have to do, but we were stuck on using the user guide for like a considerable amount of time before the web browser patch came out. And then we were able to now use the web browser to load our exploit pages now. The other payloads we had were FTP plus debug settings. Now this is pretty much identical to the one we have now on 5.05. You launch FTP, there was no notifications that popped up, but as long as you didn't get out of memory errors, you knew it worked. And then we could go on to FileZilla and connect to our PS4 just as we normally do on 5.05. This process is still exactly the same. Even the port number 1337, and then you can connect, and as you can see, we're connected. Now the last thing I want to show you guys is how we used to run game backups on 1.76, because this was a whole process. I mean, it's so much easier now. All you do now, of course, is you run the hen payload, and then you just download a fake package file, install it on your PS4, and then you're good to go. You run the game and everything works. But it was quite a different process on 1.76 because we never even had fake package files. We had no fake package files. So you had to use the raw game files. So the way this worked, which is pretty interesting, I think, but the way this worked is you used to go onto the data folder on your hard drive, and then you'd create a title ID folder with the title ID of a game that you already have on disk. So a retail game disc that you have. So this is GTA 5 EU version, Europe version. So it's CUSA 00411. And then in that folder, you put the dumped game, the decrypted game that you want to run. So COD Ghosts is a game that I don't actually have installed, but I've got the dumped version of it here that I've downloaded and put in here. And you've got the decrypted files as well that are added on there, the decrypted eboot and modules and stuff like that. So then what you would do to get this game actually running, so you put in the actual game that you have on disk, so GTA 5 in this case. So then what you had to do is run the elf loader, which was another thing, because as well as .bin payloads, there were also .elf payloads, and that required a different loader. So you had to run that locally on your system, the elf loader. So you had to have Node.js installed, and you just run this, and that starts hosting the elf loader on port 5350. Then what you had to do was get the donor disk payload. And this is how this worked. So in order to actually get the game to work, you had to use a donor disk. So you take a game that you have on disk, in this case it's GTA 5, and then when you run it, you use this donor disk payload so that when you run GTA 5, it switches the game files out for the ones that you have in that data folder with the same title ID as your game, and then it will run that game. So it'll run the game from the data folder instead of the game that's on the disk. But you had to use the game disk to actually launch your backups. So that's how this worked. It was a pretty kind of interesting way of doing things. So I just change the IP address here to 219 and save it. And then I've got my elf file here, my loader for GTA 5. And then this little script kind of simplifies it for you. So D is for the donor disk payload that I want to load. And then we're hosting. And then one other thing you might want to do as well is open up another CMD window also in here. 3 CMD windows for this. And this one, you would type in nc192.168.137.219, the IP address of my PS4. And then I would enter 5088. So that's the listener to check to make sure that the payload loads successfully. So this is a whole crazy process. So then what we would do is we went onto the internet browser and we would have to basically clear everything because the elf loader would use up a lot of the browser's memory and you'd get out of memory errors a lot of the time when trying to run this. So we would clear all of our website data and cookies, and then finally we would load the IP of my computer, which is hosting the elf loader. 5350 was the port number. And then we go there and it loads to stage 5, which means it's loaded. And then you just hope for the best and hope that you don't get an out of memory error when you try and load the donor disk payload, as I'm doing right now. And there you go, it worked. It didn't get any errors, which is surprising. And then you check to make sure it actually did load everything successfully by going to this CMD window and running the listener. And as you can see, it says started successfully, so we know we're all good there. So then I just press the middle button on the PS4 and run my disk game for GTA 5. And what it should do is swap out. As you can see, a bunch of stuff is popping up there in the listener. And it looks like it's loading GTA 5, but then it switches to my game backup that I have in the data folder and loads Call of Duty Ghosts. And there we go. That's Call of Duty Ghosts running. Just go with this. As you can see, it's running. If I back out here, you can see it thinks that I'm running GTA 5 and I do not have Call of Duty Ghosts installed. So that is how you had to get game backups working. And there were quite a few issues with this. I remember there being issues with the save files. You were able to save your game, but if you swapped out the game for a different game in the data folder, but you used the same payload, the same donor disk to launch it, then it would overwrite the save file for the previous backup that you had on there and stuff like that. So there were these kind of weird issues, but yeah, I thought it would be interesting just to take a kind of nostalgic look back at this old original jailbreak for the PS4 and to show that we've actually come quite a long way from where we started here with this jailbreak. I mean, I know a lot of people complain about the 5.05 jailbreak, and if you look back at 1.76, there were no fake package files. You couldn't, running game backups was a hassle, as you could just see there with the whole donor disk thing. And plus that only happened towards the end of the 1.76 jailbreak, just before 4.05 came out. That exploit came out, we had this. So for the most part on 1.76, you couldn't run game backups at all. And then We had, we weren't able to run homebrew or PS2 games or emulators, and, running PC mods for games on like Skyrim and Fallout 4, because those games didn't even run on 1.76. The only games you could actually run on such an old firmware like 1.76 were like cross-gen games with the 7th gen consoles like GTA 5 and Call of Duty Ghosts and Advanced Warfare and The Last of Us and games like that were all on 7th generation consoles anyway, which had better exploits. So yeah, as you can see, we have actually come a long way with the PS4 jailbreak from 1.76 to 5.05, and maybe we'll get a 6.20 or 6.70 or 7.02 exploit sometime in hopefully the near future. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was a little bit different, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it anyway. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next video.